Hi, this is Carson with Troy, and my next guest is someone who makes me feel like I need a degree in galactic history just to talk to him. He's the author of the Sun Eater series, epic space opera, philosophy, monsters, and more Latin than my high school teacher ever managed to teach me. He's been compared to Herbert and Tolkien, which is just unfair because I'm pretty sure those two didn't have to manage social media algorithms. Please welcome back the man that taught us that silence isn't empty, it's epic, Christopher Ruocchio. Thank you so much for getting on with me today.
Well, thanks, man. That was a heck of an introduction. I'm glad to be back. Good to see you.
Well, it's good to have you back, my friend. Last time you were here, we were still trying to figure out if Hadrian was doomed or just dramatically misunderstood. Your last book comes out this next month, October 18th, Shadows Upon Time. So let's talk. The series is done. You've survived, and the universe hasn't imploded yet. So tell us about it. For those who don't know, say you have an elevator. You go in an elevator, but it only goes 2 floors up. Let's say that you got 30 seconds basically to kind of pitch it. How would you pitch it?
Yeah, so Sun Eater is a space opera, science fantasy adventure. It's set about 20,000 years into our future, not a galaxy far, far away. And it's a story of a young nobleman named Hadrian who finds himself caught in the middle of a war between the human empire and the Cielcid, who are the first aliens who, in 20,000 years, have ever really posed a threat to us. And his story is about why, sorry, he tells us on page one that he is the man who ended that war. I've done this so many times, the words have all squished together. He's the man who ended that war and dealt with the aliens. His story is why and how, and about all the things that didn't make it into the official history books. You'd think I have it down by now, but it's early yet. So
No, I think when we talked, when I first met you, you kind of pitched it as, what if Darth Vader won? Is this still
yeah,
kind of like that?
the old line I was using, because this really worked in a convention setting. If I had about 5 seconds, was it's like Star Wars if Anakin becoming Darth Vader were his best available option.
Right.
Um,
That's what it
yeah,
was.
yeah. And I think, in a sense, that's still true. Your mileage may vary. There are some people who are like, I don't know that that was really the pitch, but I think there's enough of Darth Vader and Hadrian, and in sort of the aesthetics of the universe to maybe for that to still maybe be accurate for most people. I will say, if you like Star Wars, or rather, if you liked Star Wars, Sun Eater is sort of I'm one of many science fiction writers who's disillusioned with the direction of some of the bigger franchises, and I hope that this sort of fills a Star Wars shaped hole in some of my readers' hearts. Um, as it has for me. So
So Sunday's series is wrapped up, which means you can finally sleep again. Or are you already secretly plotting, a spin-off, a prequel, or, a
uh,
definitely final trilogy?
no spin-offs or prequels at the moment. I would like to come back, but my next project, which I already started, is totally unrelated. I can't talk too much about it just yet. It is a fantasy. It's not a science fiction series, but it'll be 3 books. But it's totally disconnected from Sun Eater in every way. It's a new thing, sort of a new thought experiment, a new focus. We'll be able to talk about it soon. I'm very excited to talk about it. But I've outlined the first book already, and I plan to start writing it, if not next month, after all the craziness with book 7 is over. I'll start it for real.
So what can you tell us about that next fantasy? Can you tell us like the subgenre?
No,
No?
I will say only that, like, I feel that fantasy has gotten away from some of its roots, and this is my attempt to sort of get back to brass tacks, um, and get back to the fantasy of it all, right at the core, right at the start, and that's maybe a little bit of a half baked thing to say, but I probably shouldn't say much more. Um,
Fantastic. I look forward to
yeah,
that.
yeah,
Um,
thanks.
Fantastic writer. So anything you put out, I'm grabbing up, gobbling up. So that's
Yeah, thanks,
awesome.
man. I hope people will like it. It's when people see what it is, it won't be a huge surprise. I think that'll be my clue.
Okay. That's awesome. There's for you people watching or listening, that's your clue. You can dig deeper if you choose to. Um, so I got a question. If Adrian walked into a bar, what drink is he ordering, and who's he complaining about to the bartender?
That's an interesting one. Now the drink is easy. Hadrian drinks a lot of wine in the text. He's a big wine guy. Red for sure. It's the drama and the you know capital R romance of it all. But as far as who's he complaining about, in a sense, his boss, right? Hadrian faces perhaps more opposition from his own side than the aliens throughout his story. So it's not the emperor; he's not the problem. It's everybody else in the government. Uh, and one of the sort of running themes for me in sort of world building has been governments are very redundant, right? They have a lot of departments that do the same thing. They all fight each other for results, and so there are all sorts of branches of the imperial service that are trying to step over each other to cause problems or solve them. To cause more than they solve. You know how it is. And so there's a lot of that. So there'd be a lot of complaining about that, I think.
That's awesome. Your books feel like they were written by a philosopher trapped in a space opera. When you write, do you start with a question about humanity or with a cool scene, and philosophy just kind of shows up uninvited?
Yeah, well, it's not uninvited, but it does show up. I've been thinking about this a lot lately because I've been outlining and been working on this new series, and with that, I've really gone back and I've had to start world building again, which most of the world building I've done throughout my career has been sort of iterative. I've been working on a setting I already had and been working on since I was a kid, right? And so with the new thing, I'm really, we as human beings can't create ex nihilo. We're not God, right? But we're as close to out of nothing, right? I had literally no documents, no anything. So I have to go back to history and mythology and things and sort of draw inspiration from there and mush things around. But that's as close to zero as you can get as a writer. And I realized that in order to get to the outline and really build the story, I'm actually like a plot first guy. Character has never been a great mystery to me. I sort of when I make up a character, as soon as I have a name really and like one thing about them, like I kind of can reverse engineer the whole person and so character and theme are sort of brought in after they're like the furniture and the plot for me is the floor plan and I really need to figure out what I want to have happen in order for the characters and for me to know how I feel about what's happening. So when I'm outlining, it's always like it's cool scenes, right? I start with some like a kind of a grab bag of cool ideas that I think would go into what's on here the next book, right? I always knew the ending of the series. So book seven, I was always sort of book seven was the idea, and the rest of the series was kind of justifying getting to book seven. And I had this constellation of little, story points that I wanted to get to eventually. And when I would write the next book, I would look at that sort of, and it wasn't really written down or anything. I just had kind of a amorphous cloud of ideas that were Sun Eater ideas. And I would say, well, that one could fit in this book here, and that one could fit in this book there. And I've actually used all of them, which is cool. And they also like you have a couple ideas and they give you a new idea and they sort of grow, right? But it's always like I want a cool thing to happen, and then really what the book is trying to say, and you should be trying to say something as an artist. It's not enough to just entertain, right? Like the way you entertain people is by talking about reality in some way, or at least your interpretation of it. And but you can't. I don't think you should lead with that. I think that should emerge right from the action of the drama and the personality of the characters, and from yourself, of course, right? But naturally, it all comes from yourself, or at least through yourself. And yeah, I try to tell a cool story first and then make it meaningful, rather than start with meaning and then make it cool. I think that's the danger of a lot of like adults trying to write children's entertainment is it's like when you have that one teacher who's trying to make Shakespeare cool and they try too hard. I think a lot of people write that way. They're like, how do I get people to understand, that like I don't know, being mean is bad or something. You start the idea that being mean is bad, and then the story sucks,
Yeah,
and you know the thing is that philosophical truths I think are objective and universal, right? As a Christian, and so they suffuse the writing naturally because we like arrive at these sort of moral principles naturally just by having characters interact, because that's what life is like anyway. So um, you may as well start with a cool sword fight, right, on a spaceship, and figure out how you're going to say something from there.
that's awesome. You mentioned, the scenes that you've been able to work into your stories. Um, are there scenes that you loved and just didn't make it in the final books? Something that still haunts you, like a lost friend or a bad first draft?
No, not really. I am having finished the book. I'm very at peace with the whole thing. There are like sentences and paragraphs that I would repolish or something, but there's nothing that was really left on the cutting room floor that I miss. Um, you try to use the whole animal, right? And I hate wasting stuff. So if I can, there's stuff that ended up getting pushed forward in the series. Like I couldn't make work when I was outlining book two, ended up in book six or something. But like even like abandoned plot threads or unresolved questions are opportunities for later, right? Sun Eater will in the long term be a persistent universe. I will come back to it. I will write. I've already written more short stories since I finished book seven, but I will write new novellas and I will write new novels, and there will be a new series at some point in the same universe. I'm not done. I see no reason to make another sci-fi setting. I'd spent so much time on this one that doing it all over again, I think it would be hard, and I think it would be unnecessary. Because I think that one of the things that we as science fiction fans, as nerds, like is connectivity and sort of depth of scope and breadth of scope. And so if I have a science fiction idea that can be a Sun Eater universe idea, it should be. Um, because then it's actually that book starts out a little deeper because it's connected to all this other stuff. The only reason I would write a sci-fi thing outside of that setting is if it's just fundamentally incompatible in some way with like the history of the galaxy and that universe or whatever. And so yeah.
Awesome. Let's say there's a multiverse where every author becomes one of their own characters. Which version of you are we talking to tonight? The galactic chronicler, the sword wielding scholar, or the exhausted coffee drinker on a deadline?
Realistically, probably compared to, Hadrian or something, right? Like I'm still a kid, right? So, he's like 1,000 something by the end of the series, and I don't really know what that's like. I only fake it, for work, and so practically speaking, I'm probably a lot closer to like book one Hadrian, um, than any of the other ones. As much as I'd like to be later. You know, nobody's ever really finished, right? But I try to be humble here. I think that I have a lot of growing to do. I'm not 80 yet, so.
That's awesome. Um, Writers and most people have their own sacred rituals of procrastination. For some, it's cleaning. For others, it's staring in the voids, doom scrolling. What's your go-to way to not write?
Man, so unfortunately my go-to way to not write is doom scrolling. Actually, I have several protections in place to try and prevent that. I can't watch YouTube on my phone at all. I've locked myself out of it. I have other things that keep me from doing any of the social media work air quotes, until the afternoon. Because my best writing time is in the morning. The earlier the better, frankly. Most of book seven I was getting up at 4 because my children woke up at 8, and I needed to get something like half a work day in somewhere. Because my wife and I are both at home, and the kids are both at home, and so even in the best of circumstances, there's an emergency, and I'm getting called downstairs. Um, so I will get up early and try to write, and the other stuff, writing newsletters and answering emails and things, that's interruptible in a way that writing just isn't. And so I have to be really careful about my time in the morning because if I make the mistake of sitting down in the wrong place where I can just watch YouTube for 2 hours, I will, and the day is shot, and I'm in a bad mood. So I have to try really, really hard to protect that morning routine and get it working correctly. And of course, that starts the night before, and the problem there is I like playing video games. That's my preferred form of media consumption at this point. And so the only time I can do that is after the kids go to bed. And so if I stay up too late, have too much fun, then I still ruin the next morning in some way. So those two things are really the twin dangers for me. But you should relax a little bit. It's good to do a little something, but trying to find a way to optimize my free time, such as it is, in such a way that it doesn't limit my not free time. That's the challenge. But yeah, it's YouTube videos and it's video games.
What's your go-to video game?
So right now, I just finished playing Hollow Knight Silk Song, which is a fun story. The first one came out in 2017, but I didn't play it until a year later. and I was playing it when Empire of Silence came out. It was July 2018. I had some friends who were staying with me, and one of them was playing it, and I thought it looked great, so I got the game. And I love those old school sort of Metroid style, Castlevania style games, and it's a very good example of that. And then very famously, I don't know if you know the story, the developers, like three guys in Australia, right, made this mega $1 million video game. Said, we have this DLC where you play as another character. We'll have it out next year. 7 years later, it was its own game, and it finally came out. But it happened to come out right when Book Seven was wrapping up, so it was perfect timing for me. Not an inappropriately long wait at all, and it was great. I just wrapped it up. Super super fun. Very hard, but I think everybody whining about how hard it is. Like video games don't have to be easy. I think they'd be too easy for too long now. So it was a nice change for me. I In that vein, I'm a big fan of all the From Software games. Dark Souls. I started playing this back in 2011, the first Dark Souls game. Elden Ring, of course, is the latest one. I played a lot of the Night Rain spinoff earlier this year. Kind of wore thin on me after 100 hours or so, but there'll be DLC soon. I'll take another crack at it.
Awesome. If you could throw any two famous sci-fi characters into an arena, who would you throw in there and who's walking out alive?
Um, like to fight specifically.
To fight specifically, say Hadrian versus Paul Atreides or Darth Vader, Andrew
Yeah,
Wiggins.
yeah. Man, so I think it would be really interesting to see how someone like Paul could handle a Jedi, or if he could, right? Because I feel like the fight between someone who has this near perfect vision of the future and someone with telekinesis is interesting, right? Because Star Wars force powers, right? The movies are pretty restrained with them in a way that like fans' heads aren't, right? And if we had the screen version of Darth Vader fight the text version of Paul, I think weapons being equal, there's an interesting conversation as to how that would play out. Maybe the arena is not the right setting, right? Maybe it would be more interesting if it was, more of an expanded narrative. But those skill sets are um, they're very mismatched in a way that's kind of interesting. The reality with any of these sort of matchups, though, right? The old Superman versus Goku question, or Batman versus anybody, is that like the answer to who wins is whoever you can write a compelling argument for, right? And the arguments are called stories. And so I have a friend who was like, it's ridiculous, Batman can't beat Spider-Man or whatever. And it's like, you could write a good enough story where he could, right? Like, and if the story was good, then he won, right? If the story was bad, then there's a different problem. But I get it, Spider-Man's a lot stronger, I get it, right? But that's not the point. The point is the narrative, right? So if you could write a good story where Paul fights Darth Vader. I think that'd be cool. I'll take you kind of walk that one over the home plate for me, but I'll take it. You know, yeah,
That's awesome. I remember Stan Lee was asked that question once, and he was like, "Who, whatever the author wants to win." Like and that's kind of your same answer. Like if it's a cool narrative, like whoever that person um, decides to win at the moment and make it cool, like that's the person that'll win.
yeah. I always think it's funny in these arguments that we like sort of take out the fight on the characters, right? It's like, what? Batman sucks. He can't beat Spider-Man. When like really, like if there is a Batman Spider-Man crossover, versus story, and you're mad that Batman won, maybe the story sucked, right? Maybe it's the writer's fault, right? It's not Batman's fault that he was in a bad story,
Right.
right? He didn't choose to be written by a numbskull, right? And on this occasion, and so I always sort of roll my eyes when we get into these conversations a little bit because they're trying to justify it. It's like, okay, but like the real measure of success, right, is if everybody sees the story, reads it, watches it, right, and says, actually, that was awesome, right? And so it's a question of how, always how.
So you just wrapped up book seven.
Yeah.
What was your stress level like as you were as you were completing this long epic and uh, knowing that you have very rabid fans like that wanted to see an epic conclusion? What was your stress level like, and when you finished it, what was that relief like?
It's complicated. So my stress level was very high. It still really is because the book's not out yet. We have a lot to do, sort of prepping for the release. I'm going on tour. I've got like internet interviews to schedule. I've got to go to Dragonsteel in December, the Brandon Sanderson show in Salt Lake. Got books to buy and logistics and crap to manage. I do most of that, and my wife does most of it. But between the two of us, we do all of it ourselves. Really, it's only recently that we hired an assistant, and we're still navigating how to have an assistant. Like that's a different set of challenges, right? It's like, oh, right, like I need to make sure that I like tell this person how to do stuff and bring them up to speed. And it's time when like it feels faster to just do it yourself, and it's hard to sort of make that adjustment too. And but like the stress was really about that more than it was about whether or not people were going to like the book in a weird way. I like never worry about that. The time I worry the least about whether or not people are going to like the book is when I'm working on it. Because it's very, very easy. It's always been very easy for me to shut everything else off and just write when I'm writing. Procrastinating, notwithstanding, right? But like, I don't worry about people's feelings about the characters, right? I am perfectly happy to do something that's gonna irritate at least some readers, and I know I do frequently. Um, but like, you shouldn't write to please people, right? You should write the best story that you can, and the best version of the story that you're writing, right? And if that story is pleasing to people, that's good, right? But like the best stories do frustrate the audience in places, right? And you like, especially if you go rewatch it, you're like, no, Anakin, not the dark side, right? You're like, it's such a shame, right? Um, and you should feel a sense of dread, right, when the plot twist you already know is coming back and you just don't want to see the Stark family die or something, right? Like and so it's okay to be frustrated. I mean, again, look at Game of Thrones, right, which is a history of frustrating so many millions of people, and they love it for it, right? So I like never. It's very easy for me to not worry about the story itself. And then I had an experience where I'm not a very inspired writer in the sense that like I plan everything, right? Like I outline. I'm not sort of winging it. I'm not waiting for inspiration to strike. I don't believe in the muses. I'm not a pagan. And so I sit down and I sort of work at it, right? And but there are times where I'll get an idea, right, and it actually does happen, and it's like once or twice a book, maybe, right? And when that happens, right, that's when like the deeper structures of your brain are really engaged in the writing process. It's not all prefrontal cortex, right? And when that happens, I'm a lot more confident of the decisions that I'm making in the story, because it's like a more holistic choice. It's like my whole brain was sort of firing on this decision, right? And even sometimes I don't fully understand it, right? This is David Lynch talks about catching the big fish, right? He would write he'd get ideas from dreams, right, or at least the logic of his ideas from dreams, and he would try to sort of daydream and meditate and figure out where these like goofy things come up from deep inside himself, right? And I don't exactly do that, right? I'm not sure about meditation or things like that, but you do get these flashes of inspiration occasionally, right? And I think this is why, like, the Greeks sort of chase that, right, with the storytelling, right? The idea of the muse in the first place. And, because it is nice, right? But you can't count on it if you want to be a professional writer. You have to show up every day and you have to work, and, but I had the very fortunate experience of having that happen literally in the last two pages of book seven. You said this in a couple of interviews already, so but I had three more chapters in my outline. I think it was three, and I realized when I got to where I was like, no, it's better this way, right? And the nice thing about that is because I had this like very clear vision of how I needed to wrap things up right at the end, right? I was then very confident in that ending, and the confidence I felt then in that ending, right, was a great blessing because it sort of washed away, sort of baptized the rest of the text. It was like, okay, we got to the right place, right? So if I like strayed, right, meandered, talked too long, right, in any particular section of the series up to this, in a sense, it doesn't matter because we're in the right place, and that's made it very easy for me to make peace with the series being done. It is still weird though. I've worked on it every day of my life, really, since in some form or other since I was like 8. I've been trying to write a series since I was a little kid, and it's done now. And I didn't realize like how much processing power I was using trying to keep the story running in my head. And so I feel like the analogy I've been using, I feel like I had a very sick relative that I've been obsessing over every day, and they just passed away, which is like not a very inspiring metaphor, but like if anyone's been in that experience, there's like sort of a weird like bereft relief that you get. We're like, oh, okay, like I can breathe, right? And it's like sad, but it's also a good thing, and it's a very complicated set of emotions, and so I am very excited to see what people think about book seven. All the early reviews have been positive, and well, almost all of them. It's never perfect, right? But people seem generally pretty happy, and even if they're not, I am, and it would take a lot to dissuade me. So I feel very good about the whole thing.
So when you were done, I mean, you said you already had the fantasy or you're working on the fantasy thing, but was there a minute or 10 where you're like, man, what do I do now?
Um, Not really. The thing about having two small children is they find stuff for you to do.
Yeah.
Between them and my wife, there's always something, even if it's only the dishes. And so I'm sure. I think actually I finished it in the morning, and then my wife was like, "I need you to go get breakfast." She was wrangling the children. Can you go pick something up? And I don't even think I told her until like we were eating later. I was like, "Oh, I finished about 45 minutes ago, by the way." Something, you know, um, maybe anticlimactic about that. I don't know what I thought the last day working on the books was going to be like, but it was going to be, hey, go get some biscuits, right? But here we are. Life goes on, right? Nothing really ends, right?
Right.
And so it was back to work the next day on another thing. And Lord knows, I've got so many plates spinning. It's still kept showing up to work. So
That's
uh,
awesome. Now, and
yeah,
I,
I did get the copies in 2 days ago. I got my
oh,
my
nice.
personal copies in book seven, so they're all together on the shelf now, and that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, 3 years ago was the last time we had an interview. So lots has changed, lots has happened, including and we don't have to go in detail. I want to know more your mindset, maybe give advice for people who um, maybe go through kind of similar things. Um, it's published with Daw. They kind
Mhm.
of dropped it. Bain picked it up, then Daw picked it back up. Is that kind of the summary of kind of
That's
how it
basically
happened?
it. Yeah, I was let go after book five. Uh, so the thing about long series, right, is that the next book always sells less than the previous one, right? If they're like straight sequels, if you have to read book one to read book two, right? Now, when book two comes out, book one usually gets a bump because when you have the new book two out, the booksellers, and this is true even in indie, but especially in traditional publishing, the booksellers at Penguin or at Simon and Schuster, whoever, right? They're incentivized obviously to mention book one to Barnes and Noble and all the other bookstores, right? Because if you go into a store and you only see book three in a series, like you're not going to pick it up, right? So they need to make sure that they've got at least a little bit of backstock on the earlier titles, and so the whole series gets a bump, but the curve is always down, right? Something like a non-sequential mystery series, right? It doesn't matter which thriller book you read with this character, right? Those you can actually see the curve go up, right? But if it's a sequential, episode three, right? You gotta watch one and two, right? It's tricky. Um, and so by book five, the drop off, looking at publishing book six was just not very inspiring. They're just like, yeah, it's gonna be the margins are gonna be tight. We can't, print orders will be lower, right? So because I was doing okay, I all my books had earned out, but I wasn't winning, and the series had kind of kept getting away from itself. It was getting longer, and it was continuing. There were a lot of reasons for that. There was a paper shortage in 2020 as a consequence of the pandemic, and that caused one of my books to get chopped into two books. So it was supposed to be a five-book series, and then when they did that, they split book four into two books. That burned out my contract, but it also led me to conclude that book five was also going to be split, which turned out to be correct because I was originally envisioning four and five were one book, and six and seven were one book. And if six and seven were one book, it would be 700,000 words or something. Like it's just There's just no way. Um, Not quite 700,000, but close to six something, I think. High fives. It would have been very long, and very long books pose other problems, right? You can't, the spines don't hold together. There's like a, well, glue is only so much good, right? And you can only make the paper so thin and the margins so small. But so ran into a bunch of problems, and they just called it. They said, pack it and you're done, right? And I used to work for Bain, so I called them and said, "Hey, do you want the last two books?" And they said, "Sure." And so we moved over to Bain for book six, and then my sales went up. Daniel Green, Patrick Leo, Mike Kern, a bunch of these booktube reviewers had gotten really into the series, and they were so gracious in their praise that my sales went up quite dramatically, more or less overnight. I had a graph somewhere where I got the sales data in from my publisher, and you could literally see the plateau where Daniel's review was in particular. And it never went back down, blessedly. So thank you, Daniel, Mike, Patrick, and it was really Mike was the first. Mike was really early to the game on that. But I've gotten a lot of traction on YouTube, and then later on TikTok, which I don't even have a TikTok, so that's cool. Best of both worlds, I think, and that traction helped a lot. And when my sales went up, obviously Dawes sold the first five books, so they got new data in, and they said, wait a second, why did we let him go? And then I was traded like a baseball player back to Daw. They scooped book six back, and Bain did quite nicely by the whole thing, and so everybody I think won because it's obviously better for me if the books are all in one place, right? It's logistically simpler. It's less confusing to readers. It's you know this is like super granular publishing stuff, but like Bain and Daw have different factories. They have different distribution networks, and so the odds that you would find all seven books in the store at the same time were zero, right? It just was not going to happen, and they didn't match either. Bain's bindery made the books a little bit taller, and that was a huge problem for my readers. The bookshelves have to be perfect, which I get, but there was nothing I could do. And so actually, as we're recording this, book six just got re-released in hardcover for Daw 2 days ago. 2 days ago, and so now you can get the series finally for the first time ever in a matching edition. At least the first six books, seven will be out next month, November 18th. So end of November, the whole series you could get in one consistent format. Your shelf will look perfect, I promise. And for my readers, the nightmare is over at last. So their shelves are safe.
That's awesome. 1,000 years from now, some archaeologists finds a preserved copy of Empire of Silence. What do you hope they think about humanity? And do you think they'll forgive us for all the TikToks?
Depending on what happens, maybe they won't even know about the TikToks, right? It's really the aliens we have to apologize to, all those radio signals. But one good solar flare and TikTok's done. Well, maybe we'll forget about it. But I do largely think that social media, it's a good for this industry, but I think it's bad for people psychologically. I don't think that's a controversial statement. I'm grateful, to social media and everybody who uses it, and to the community sort of networking. But I do think it's important to minimize your own personal time on the internet. We call it doom scrolling for a reason, right? And So I don't know if people forget. As far as the manuscript, I don't know. I mean, people will know what science fiction is, right? It's not like you know people will be confused about whether or not it won't be like Galaxy Quest, but like some sort of weird historical version where it's like, was this real? Like, do we have a galactic civilization? The answer is like no. Like 1,000 years from now, we'll probably be able to square that circle pretty easily. I would just be honored that somebody's reading it in 1,000 years, even if it's only to study literature of the period. So that would be it's a nice thought to imagine someone reading it so far in the future. I suspect that will not be my fate, but I'm not Tolkien, so
You never know.
yeah, you don't, but I'm not banking on it.
You'll be long gone, so you won't know
Yeah, it won't
anything
matter.
either.
On
Uh,
to hopefully better things.
Now, Chris, thanks for getting on with me today. You mentioned some things and some events that you're going to. Can you kind of tell us the dates that that you're going on tour where people can meet you and how they can get a hold of you?
Yeah. So we got the new book coming out next month on November the 18th. But before that happens, on the 15th, which is a Saturday, we'll be doing a special sort of pre-release book launch event here in Raleigh, North Carolina. By the time this goes out, I think tickets will no longer be available. We've got about 300 people coming to that, which is very exciting. It's been a lot of work, but I think it'll be a good time. The book comes out on the 18th, which is a Tuesday. I will be live streaming on my channel, which is Sun Eater Books on YouTube for most of that day. I think I'm going to try to have some folks come in and hang out with me to celebrate, taking questions from the readers and so on. The next day, on the 19th, I'm on a plane, and I will be in Salt Lake City on the 20th. I forget the time of day. I think it's 6 p.m. at the King's English Bookstore. I will be doing an event there. And then I will be getting on a plane again, and on the 21st, I will be in Plano, Texas. I will be doing a signing at the Barnes& and Noble there at 7 p.m., I believe. And then I will be going to South Lake, Texas the next day at noon at the Barnes& and Noble. I'll be coming back to that one, actually. I was there last year. They asked me to come on back, and I'll be doing an event there. That's on the 22nd, I think I said. And then I will be headed on home for Thanksgiving, but I will be back in Salt Lake for Dragonsteel Nexus, which I think is the 4th through the 6th of December. I'll be there. I'll be selling books. So if anybody is in the area, I was coming to that show, which is huge. It's like 12,000 people, I think. I will see you there. That may be sold out already as well. But I think I'll do it for now. One of my goals for next year is to travel a bit more. I mostly have been doing events in places like Texas and Utah because those are the states I do the best in for whatever reason. Almost all of my top 10 Barnes and Nobles are in Texas, so it's a good reason for me to go there. But I wanna get around a bit more in the coming year. No news on that yet. It's just sort of a mission statement. But I'd love to get back to the West Coast. I haven't been there in a long time, and I'd love to do the Midwest and get up to the Northeast and things as well. But no promises. It's always funny when you announce you're gonna do a tour and you don't end up in someone's house. They're just like, "What? You can't come 20 minutes closer?" It's like, I got on a plane, man. Like, drive. It's one of the more frustrating author comments you get. It's like, "What? Not on my street? In my driveway? How could you?" And I don't know. I don't know. So yeah, so we'll be out on the road a little bit, and hopefully more in the next year. So stay tuned, everybody. But it'll be a busy couple months for me for sure. I'm looking forward to Christmas.
Awesome. Chris, this was fantastic. It's always a pleasure to dive into that wonderfully terrifying brain of yours. Congratulations on finishing the Incredible Saga. It's rare that a series this big is finished nowadays. Next time, though, I expect you to bring a map of the Empire, a pronunciation guide, and maybe a therapist notes explaining how you survived writing it. Um, Thank you so much. And hopefully, when the next fantasy series comes out, we can do this again.
Yeah, man, you bet.
Thank you for listening to the Troy Podcast. Please subscribe, like, and share with your friends.